Hey everybody, so today I'm bringing you another video on cryptocurrencies, and this is a video on Mt. Gox. This video, I've got another video on Mt. Gox. It might not be out when I post this video, but it'll be coming. But the other video on Mt. Gox on the theft of the 850,000 Bitcoin, that is just talking about sort of the conspiracy side of things, the parts that haven't been proven, and there's very little that anyone knows about Mt. Gox. So as of right now, the only connection anybody really has is that guy Alexander Vinnik, the Russian. But anyways, Wizzsec did this video detailing the theft, and I thought the video they did was absolutely terrible. The guy who was the head of security or whatever for Wizzsec, who did all the tracking, he spent basically 30 minutes of a 45-minute video patting himself on the back and saying, "I'm so smart, this is how I caught him." And nobody wanted to know how he caught the thief. They wanted to know what happened with the thief. Like, how did the thief steal the coins? Where did the coins go? Who's got the funds? This guy made himself the star of the show, and the star of the show is the thief. The thief's not a good star to have of our show. It's not a good show. That our show is the Mt. Gox theft, but it's a show nonetheless. And I'm just trying to tell you guys, because if you try and watch that video by Wizzsec, like, you can watch it, but it's one of the most dry and boring things I've ever heard, and he doesn't really explain very well what happened. Like, he explains it, but he just says it in a very confusing way, so you might have missed what he said when he says it. So anyways, I'm going to go over the main points here of the Mt. Gox theft. The first one's just that there were 850,000 Bitcoin stolen at the time. This was like September 2011, or no. They were stolen in September of 2011, I guess, but they didn't come out about it until like 2013 or 2014. But anyways, when they said the Bitcoin were stolen, like, literally nobody knew how. Mt. Gox didn't have any thing to say, which made a lot of people believe that Mark Karpalez was involved, and nobody had anything to say, which was really weird, even though all the Bitcoin should have been able to track them on the blockchain. The next bit is that the wallet.dat file was actually stolen. It was stolen, and then the thief waited to strike, and that's important because back at the time when the wallet.dat file was stolen, this was 2011, Bitcoin hadn't been out for that long, the wallets weren't actually encrypted, so you just needed access to the servers, and a lot of people have said Mark Karpalez is kind of incompetent in the way he ran his business, and then Jed McCaleb, who ran it before him, just had no idea that Bitcoin was going to get this big, so they were both in over their heads. But anyways, the wallet.dat file was stolen, and I know that sounds a bit odd, but just because generally speaking, when a wallet.dat file, like, if it was stolen, you'd only expect a few Bitcoin to be stolen, but there's actually one big issue, and this is how I would assume a majority of the coins were stolen. There's nothing that necessarily links these up, because if you look at actually the Wizzsec data, the data is missing between, or it's incomplete between about June to something like December of 2011. There's a few months that they're missing, or have incomplete data on. Well, Mt. Gox, in order to prove, after one of the hacks that had occurred at the exchange, in order to prove they had all their coins, they moved 424 Bitcoins. The problem with moving 424 Bitcoins is if your wallet.dat file is stolen and your hot wallet is compromised and you move 424,000 Bitcoin, you can lose all those Bitcoin. So, I mean, when people ask how having a hot wallet compromised you could lose all those Bitcoins, this is kind of how, if you assume that the thief stole this 424 Bitcoin. But anyways, this thief had he struck Mt. Gox, but then after striking Mt. Gox operated for years, and it misappropriated customer funds, and potentially operated as a money laundering sort of operation. And the reason why I say they might have operated as a money laundering operation is they found 200,000 Bitcoin. They just, like, after it came out that they had no Bitcoin left, they just out and said, "Oh, hey, yeah, we've got 200,000 extra Bitcoin here in this stash that we just forgot about," you know. But anyways, I don't actually think that they forgot about those Bitcoin. What I think, and this is just not something that you can prove, but I think there's a potential chance that what happened was is when Mt. Gox lost all the bitcoins, Mark Karpalez didn't want to come out and say it because he didn't know what had happened, and he tried to do some sort of illegal business deals and money laundering in order to repay the customers. But is that what happened? I don't really know. Nobody really knows what's going on with that 200,000 Bitcoin stash. And this is one of the things I'm talking about in the Wizzsec video, that they didn't really talk about things like this. Like, he mentions the 200,000 Bitcoin stash just in passing, and that's it. He never really talks about how Mt. Gox, I mean, he says this in passing, that Mt. Gox operated for years when they had no Bitcoin, if you just by checking on the blockchain. So the question is like, how and why were they doing that? So they're obviously misappropriating company funds. How and why are they doing that? And we'll get into that in more detail here in just 1 second. So the first thing here is, there are 850,000 bitcoins missing, and Mt. Gox had no answers for this impossible theft. They said it was transaction malleability in the beginning, but everybody knew that was impossible. So, like, because Bitcoin uses a public blockchain, we all should have been able to look at the blockchain and see it, but there was no information coming out. And so this was just something that everyone knew, like, shouldn't have happened, but did. It happened but shouldn't have happened, and everyone wanted to know why. So the questions that were asked was Mark Karpalez incompetent, or was he the thief? And the truth, it turns out, is actually more complex than we can imagine. It's the guy who stole the money from Mt. Gox was very smart, and the person who yeah, I guess the guy who stole is just very smart. The entire organization, I guess, that did this. And I say organization because it's highly likely it was just one person. It was probably one person who did the theft, but then once they steal it, they have to launder it through somebody, and the launderer has to sell those coins to somebody. So there's a lot of involved parties, and not all of them are actually criminal. But anyways, what had actually happened to Mt. Gox is they had their wallet.dat file copied. Now, when you have your wallet.dat file copied, the issue is that, at least at the time, when this wallet.dat file was copied, not Mt. Gox, but Bitcoin did not have encrypted wallets at the time. So whatever server you had, that had to be encrypted and it had to be secure. Otherwise, someone with access to it could copy your wallet.dat file, and your wallet.dat file, that's everything. With Bitcoin now, it's encrypted, and so you don't have to worry about that really as much, but you had to worry about it at this point in time. And so obviously, the one thing that we know though too about the thief stealing the wallet.dat file is that they definitely had access to Mt. Gox's servers. They literally had to log on to one of Mt. Gox's servers with the wallet.dat file. So it's someone very close to the organization. Whether or not it was just some guy who came in to, you know, sort of give them advice or something like that, but it might have been some computer security guy who tried to help them out with something, who knows, but it was somebody who literally had physical access to their servers. The other thing that's important is that the wallet.dat file was copied before Bitcoin wallets used deterministic wallets, determinism. I don't know if you can say determinism. I know they use deterministic wallets. I don't know if you can say determinism for it. But anyways, what that means is that a deterministic wallet, when it's created, each wallet can have actually a bunch of, I guess you can call them basically like sub-wallets. Your wallet itself has many wallet addresses, but they're all to that one single wallet that belongs to you. So when you initially would create wallets, they would have 100 of those next wallet addresses ready for you to use. That way, in case you put the wallet in like cold storage or used it as a backup, and then that wallet would still have, you know, 100 new addresses that would be usable before issues would start happening. And so that's all been fixed now. They use determinism now, but the reason why that's important is when the thief stole the wallet.dat file, the wallet.dat file is just a copy of the original file, so both of these wallets had the same 100 next wallet addresses. So when the thief stole the coins initially, everything looked like it was still going to Mark Karpalez. And now this is part of where the Wizzsec guy didn't really make a lot of sense. He was a little confusing when he was trying to say whether or not you couldn't tell that the thief had coins Until September 2011 or later. It was a little confusing. It sounded like at September 1st, 2011, that's when the split happened. That's when you could tell that the coins were on different wallets. That's when you could tell someone had stolen the coins. He didn't really explain that well, and that's when I'm talking about he didn't explain the thief or the theft that well. But anyways, it either happened one of two ways. Either one, this theft went unnoticed basically forever because when Mark Karpalez moved the 424k Bitcoin to one of the wallets, he moved it to a wallet that a thief had stolen, but he just didn't know that the thief had stolen it. And because Mt. Gox kept the coins on there for so long, they just eventually forgot about it. And because the thief had the backup file, he just loaded in the backup and walked away with the money. That's one idea. That's the idea that the thief had stolen these coins back in September of 2011, and then Mt. Gox still didn't know about it until like 2014 or 2013, whatever it was, the date was that they actually went under. But the other idea is that the thief had the wallet.dat files, so he had these coins stolen for a while, but he just waited for Mt. Gox to move the 424 Bitcoin in order to prove that they actually had the Bitcoin. And so he was just waiting for that, and he was just being smart, and so then right there he stole the coins. But again, this thief was very smart. He had this wallet.dat file, and he knew that for the first 100 address changes, like all those addresses, Mt. Gox would think that they owned those addresses, so their accounting system would just assume that everything was fine, even though someone else actually had access to those wallets at those addresses. So the next thing that we got to look at here is the fact that Mt. Gox then they operated for years and misappropriated customer funds. So again, I'm not completely sure how much Mt. Gox knew and when, like at what point did they know that they were missing funds, and how many funds did they know that they were missing, because they were making a lot of profit. So if they lost like 100,000 Bitcoin, they might have been able to make up for it. But anyways, this Mt. Gox starts misappropriating the customer funds. Mark Karpalez continued trading of what was known as the Willy bot, and the Willy bot was just a bot used by Mt. Gox. It was used both by Jed McCaleb and Mark Karpalez, and they would create fake funds and just start trading on the exchange. Now what that would actually do, what they were trying to do, is they were trying to make up losses, basically. If you actually look into the documents on this issue, they thought it was necessary for the exchange, and it was necessary for the exchange because even under Jed McCaleb, they had already lost, like 100,000 Bitcoin, so they were already way behind when Mark Karpalez took over. And so they had kind of started this operation in order to make money for the company. They would just buy and sell Bitcoin. The thing that happened with their plan to buy and sell Bitcoin is they lost a shitload of money. That's it. Like, they just lost a lot of money. They lost like $50 million and 25,000 Bitcoin. So lost a lot of money. Turns out they weren't all that good at trading, but they misappropriated customer funds for a very, very long time, and that should be illegal. That's not. It's not something you can do. So if this Willy bot was trading customer funds, then he was definitely misappropriating, company funds. Again, he was trying to do it to potentially win back customer funds that had been stolen from different thefts, but you still should, like, once you have yourself dug into a hole that big, quit digging. You're not the guy to dig yourself out. But anyways, the next point that is very interesting, in that again, Wizzsec didn't really talk about too much, but Mt. Gox, after the theft, they just fined 200,000 Bitcoin. They're just like, yep, we just had 200,000 Bitcoin sitting around. And just so you guys know, recently, or not that far before these 200,000 Bitcoin were found, the price of Bitcoin at the time was $1,000. So this was like $200 million. I think at the time that the Bitcoin were found, the price was around $500. So this was like $100 million worth of Bitcoin that they're just like, yep, we just found it. We just misplaced it. And it's like, if you think about this, they had all their, Mt. Gox not only had all their funds stolen, but even the funds that were still in the exchange. The company was trying to make bets on those funds through the misappropriation of funds through the Willy bot, and they still lost that money. So not only had they had all their money hacked, but any money they had left they lost through their own stupid trading. and you're telling me this insolvent exchange has 200,000 Bitcoin just lying all around? Yeah, that's very unlikely. I don't think so. So again, where did this stash come from? My thought, and again, these are, nobody knows, so there's no sort of truth to what I'm saying here. My thought is that not only was Mt. Gox misappropriating customer funds, but they were also acting as money launderers. It's obvious that the Bitcoin community has been very long sort of closely associated with the dark web, I guess you could call it, especially in its beginning. And Charlie Shrem was a close friend of Mark Karpala's, and Charlie Shrem was arrested for money laundering, and there's a potential case that Mark Karpala's was. And Mark Karpala's also, when he was younger, was arrested for a similar sort of, not necessarily money laundering, but some sort of crime involving digital currencies. And I don't want to necessarily say money laundering, but it was something to do with something similar to that. And so imagine if you're Mark Karpala's and you come into your exchange and you lost all those Bitcoin, and you're like, what do I do? Do I tell everyone I lost all their money, or do I try and just be quiet about it, save the exchange by going back to my old ways and doing money laundering for drug dealers over the dark web? You know, that's what I think happened. But I have no idea. But the real question is just where did this 200,000 Bitcoin come from? There has to be a trail of something, you know, behind it. And you don't just get 200,000 Bitcoin from nothing. So if the Mt. Gox has no answers for it, then that likely means it's illicit. But anyways, this is the whole story, the true story of what has happened at Mt. Gox and what we actually know. Again, the main thing to remember here about Mt. Gox, there's 5 real main points. The first one is that when it first happened, there's 850,000 Bitcoin stolen. Nobody knows how they got stolen. The what actually happened, what we later learned, was that the wallet.dat file was stolen before the wallets were encrypted and before they were deterministic. So the thief had access to Mt. Gox's funds and for 100 new addresses that Mt. Gox would use. And Mt. Gox just didn't know about it. And so then when the thief decided to take off with the money, Mt. Gox, like, what were they to do? I mean, there's literally nothing they could do, and nowhere that they could look, because they thought that they had the coins in their addresses, because they did. What they didn't know is somebody else had access to the private key to that address at the same time that they had access to it. So anyways, Mt. Gox moves 424 Bitcoin in June of 2011, and they say that the first theft started in September 1st, 2011. So very shortly after moving a huge amount of Bitcoin, Mt. Gox, supposedly that's when all the thefts happened. So the thefts hit them at probably the worst time. So after these thefts happened, it seems to have it did operate for years and misappropriate funds for years. The question is when did it know it didn't have any Bitcoin, and why did it not, you know, tell anybody about it? That again is another question that there's no answer to, but it was misappropriating funds for years, and it turns out they actually lost a lot of money doing that rather than making money, which is what they were supposedly, or what you would assume they were trying to do. You would assume they were trying to cover up their tracks. But anyways, the Mt. Gox then, they lost all the customer Bitcoin, yet they somehow magically found 200,000 Bitcoin in an old wallet. Again, how did they find this? Where did this come from? Nobody knows, but this has a lot more questions, and those are the questions that need to be asked. We don't need to be told by the guy who runs Wizzsec exactly how he used the blockchain to find the thief. What we need to know is, and he didn't even find the thief, he found the money launderer. What we need to find is the thief and all the relevant parties. So he needs to tell people, you know, he needs to tell people this stuff that I'm telling you guys, that all these Bitcoin got stolen. It was stolen by somebody real close to Mt. Gox. They had to have physical access to the servers. They were incredibly intelligent with the Bitcoin code, knowing something that only a very small number would know, so they're very well versed in cryptography. Yeah, I don't know, they're just very intelligent. But if you want more sort of leads, I guess you could say, on this case, on the Mt. Gox case, I've got a video I'm going to bring out, and it's, I don't know what I'll title it. It'll probably be the Mt. Gox Conspiracy, but it's just the more conspiratorial side of Mt. Gox. And when I say conspiratorial side, all I mean is the unproven side. Everyone knows what happened at Mt. Gox was a conspiracy. It's a known fact it was a theft, a criminal theft. So we know it's a criminal conspiracy. So any sort of theory involving what happened is a conspiracy theory, and so that's what the other video is. This is not a conspiracy video. This is just the truth of what happened, how the Bitcoin got stolen, and what we don't know and what we're still looking for. But the next video talks about a bunch of theoretical things that I can't prove, and so that one's a conspiracy video. But anyways, this one's just the truth about the Mt. Gox theft. Like I said, at the time when it happened, it was worth almost $1 billion, all the Bitcoin that were stolen. So it was just a massive theft, to say the least. It was one of the biggest thefts that have occurred in history, period. Just period. One of the biggest thefts in history. And so I just think it's very interesting. So hopefully you enjoyed this video too.